Welcome to the Father on Purpose podcast, featuring author and ministry leader Kent Evans and business executive and military veteran Lawson Brown. This is a show for you, Dad. You want to be a godly and intentional father. Unfortunately, you've turned to these two knuckleheads for help. Let us know how that works out for you. Before we begin, remember this: you are not a father on accident. So go be a father on purpose. Please welcome your hosts, Kent and Lawson.
Hey, Dad, welcome to today's show. Have you ever wanted to talk to a guy who is a click or two down the fatherhood road from where you are? It's like, man, this dude's been around the block and he's actually bloodied his knuckles on a couple things I'd rather not bloody my knuckles on. And he's experienced some victories I may not have yet experienced. And so today, Lawson and I are pumped to bring you Craig Bowler. And we're going to do a longer introduction of him here in a second, or he's going to do some of that. Craig, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Honored to be here with you guys.
Man, we can't wait to talk to you.
Super great to see you, my man.
It's good to see you too.
It's a little bit of a reunion between Lawson and Craig. I'll let Lawson dive into that. Lawson, before you dive in, I just want to remind that one of our most frequently downloaded products is the Anger-Free Dad. We've had hundreds and hundreds of dads dive into this digital course on the topic of anger, or better said, on the topic of how to get rid of anger in your life. So if you're a dad and you feel occasionally angry, like I was this morning about something, go out and check out Anger-Free Dad. You can either go to manhoodjourney.org and find it, or you can just go to angerfreedad.com and we'll redirect you right where you need to be. That's angerfreedad.com. If you struggle with anger, stop struggling with anger and snag the digital course to try and help you do that. So Lawson, why don't you get us rolling with Mr. Bowler here?
What's up, fellas? Craig Bowler is my pastor. No matter where I go for the rest of my life, Craig Bowler is going to be my pastor. Same goes for my wife and daughters. I got to know Craig when we lived in Atlanta. And Craig, I'll turn it over to you in a sec to just talk about your family and history. By the way, it's not easy to find a bio on this dude. He is one of the most humble guys that I know.
Is Craig Bowler your real name? Let's just start there.
Right.
Where were you on June 2nd, 2018?
In fact, I went, one of the most special kind of faith-based periods in my life was when Craig moved from one church and started the church called Sanctuary, which is in Kennesaw, Georgia. And I got to be one of the dudes around Craig that we would get together. It was more than just even weekly, and talked through and wrote down, like, what do we want this church to be about? What do we believe in? And it was a true, like, soaking in experience for me, because Craig is just super articulate, very, very grounded. And it was a special time for me to sit around several different living rooms that we were doing this in, and basements, and like talking about what do we believe. And so I went to Sanctuary's website looking for more detail on you, dude. And here's part of what is on Craig's bio about yourself. You didn't write about yourself, sir. You said you want Sanctuary to be a place to find rest in Jesus and learn what it means to become disciples who make disciples. And so I'm gonna turn it over to you, Craig, to talk. Seriously though, dude, give like a bit of background on yourself, catch me up on your family, and explain to the guys who you are, and then we'll jump right in.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. I was just, as you were talking, Lawson, I was remembering those days. That was about 12 and a half years ago when we started Sanctuary. We were all sitting around these different living rooms. And I remember you saying, we were trying to figure out, what this church was going to be about and what we were going to believe. And I remember you saying, this must have been what it was like for the disciples after Jesus had ascended. And they're sitting around and they're going, what did he say? What are we supposed to do? How long are we supposed to wait? I remember you saying that. And it was such a sweet, sweet time. And you were like, what are we doing? You're the leader. And you're sort of like, we need to go, take charge. And I remember saying to you, Lawson, I don't know. I'm only like 3 days ahead of you guys. And as I think about it, I kind of think maybe that's me as a father. It's me as a dad right now. My older daughter is just about to be 29. I've got our first granddaughter who's just incredible. And then our younger daughter, same age as your daughter, Lawson, just graduated from college.
Yep.
22. And so, yeah, for some of these dads listening, they might think that I'm a few years ahead, but in a lot of ways, I feel like that same guy sitting in that room with you, Lawson, going, man, I don't know. I'm only 3 days ahead of you guys. I'm not exactly sure what to do or what to make of me.
So Craig, do you make a habit of jumping into leadership roles where you really don't know what you're doing?
Yeah.
Is there any leader that knows what they're doing? Tell me that.
Amen.
That's
You got
exactly
that
right.
There is.
Exactly
There
right.
is. If there's a leader who knows what they're doing, like it's got it all figured out, I'm not sure that's the leader I want to follow.
Yeah. I was just in the kitchen with Audrey right before walking in here to get online and to see you. And my whole family is super excited that you're going to be on the show, by the way. I said, what do you think? What do you want me to ask Craig? And she said basically something to the effect of, for the dad out there who is maybe struggling with release, like we're struggling with kids or whatever period of, growth they're in, adolescent, teen, going off to college, getting married, having grandkids, there's always a feeling of letting go. And, even when they're going off to first grade, that's the same feeling of letting go as it is when they are married and moving out, because you as a dad are in a different period, likewise as the kid is. What have you and Christy trusted in, and what do you say to the dads that maybe are kind of wrestling more than others with letting go and trusting?
Yeah, man, I'd say that's probably one of that's a lifelong lesson for me. That's one of the hardest things for me to do, to be honest. Like, Lawson, I can trust God with your kids all day long. But I have just honestly, it is a lifelong journey for me to trust God with my kids. I remember when my older daughter went to kindergarten for the very first day of kindergarten, I dropped her off. Well, Christy and I dropped her off. We had pictures, the whole thing. And I just wept. I thought, oh man, it's over. Like I've just given her over and I have no control. I have no say. I can't protect her. I've just got to trust the Lord with her. And that's been a lifelong journey. There was a season in my life where there's a I think it's the old King James version of the Bible that talks about Jacob and his son Benjamin. Jacob's not a great dad. We all know that he's just a terrible example. But the line says Jacob's soul was bound up in Benjamin's soul. And there was a season in my life where my older daughter, the one that I dropped off in kindergarten, when she was in high school, that a brother pulled me aside and he said, man, you're too wrapped up. You're too wrapped up in your daughter's life.
Wow.
And my soul in some ways was dependent. The way that I navigated emotionally became codependent, if you will, on the way that my older daughter. And it's lifelong, man. It's lifelong. That was, and that landed me in counseling. And I was like, what is the deal here? So again, I'm still trying to learn how to trust my daughters into the hands of our good God. I sometimes feel like I can protect them better, or I can,
Yeah. Same here. Yeah.
I know what they need. I know what to say. I know how to bless. I know how to protect. I know how to redirect. But I'm not God, and I don't know. And that's so hard. Again, I can trust God with your kids all day long, but it is a lifelong journey to learn how to trust God.
Do you remember a specific time where you were struggling with it, and then, God showed up in some way that he reminded you how truly in control he is. And that was like a breath of fresh air into your soul, for like he strengthened you through something that may have happened, where he was like, okay, so let me show Craig, he's worried, and he forgot I got this, and then did something.
Yeah, so I think one of the things I wanted to do as a dad was to protect my daughters from not experiencing the same pain that I had, right? So to create some kind of perfect situation in which they didn't feel my pain. They didn't know the pain that I knew growing up, right? So, but one afternoon when my daughter was a freshman in college, I was driving up I-75, and she called and was just tearful. I mean, just crying. And she was experiencing the pain that I knew. And I couldn't, I was so frustrated and so disappointed. She was crying so hard. I had to pull over on the shoulder of I-75 to just catch my breath, be able to engage her and to be able to talk with her. And I couldn't get my head and heart around what was going on. I was so discouraged. And if I'm honest, maybe even to that point of despair, like, I don't know what to do here. And this is my kid. And we prayed. I'm crying. She's crying. We prayed. I continued back up I-75, hung up, continued on. And later that night, she called back, and she's like, Dad, this gal in our church at the time, gal in our church who's still in our church, her name is Heather. Unprompted by me, Heather called Adele, my older daughter, who was having this thing. And she spoke words to Adele that only she could. She could speak to a part of Adele's soul that only this gal could. And there was a part of me, honestly, that felt like, well, I'm the dad. I'm that's his life. But it was God saying, I've got a lot of people around your girl. I've got a lot of people around her, people you don't even know, love her in a way.
Yep.
That was God just showing up. And he's done that time and time and time again with different people in different places, different things. But that's one example that was just, man, I'll start crying if I think about it. But again, God just showed up and was told.
Craig, Lawson, one of Lawson's daughters has a lot of people surrounding her too, but they're all wearing Disney costumes. So,
right. That's right.
I mean, like, it's like Goofy and Donald Duck, and then what do you do?
That's funny. It's funny you say that, Craig. It's like, because it's part of what is in us. I think it's a DNA thing, is to be a hero and to be a rescuer. And sometimes similar things have happened in my life as a dad. And like to be transparent, I've thought almost like that person kind of gotten the credit. But when something like that happens, it's revealing of God's truth, that he's here and he's with us, and he's always watchful. And he loves our children more than we do, if we can even fathom that.
I remember Lawson one time, and Craig, my son came home from high school, and he had a teacher who I loved. But this teacher was like, I don't know, 22, 23, and he'd been married like a year or two. And my son came home and said, "Oh, Dad, I got the best marriage advice today from so-and-so." And he goes and tells me something I had told him like 1,000 times. And Craig, I had the same like almost visceral reaction where I was like, "Hey, who bought you that cell phone, man?" Like, I kind of had this attitude like, no, duh. But then I remembered what you learned. Man, how cool is that? Yeah. I mean, how cool is that, right? It's just awesome. And I just remember, even then, this has been about 7-8 years ago. I remember even then just going, man, that is great marriage advice.
Yeah.
And I just moved on, and but I didn't want to. I wanted to go back and go, hey, how did you learn that, like, to overcome that reaction? The difference between like wanting to be like God or wanting to be God. There's this fine edge to, I want to set an example that's a Christ-like example. So like, I hear you when your buddy said maybe your soul's too intertwined, but we don't have a problem with over-engaged fathers in our country, right? We quite frankly have a problem with under-engaged fathers. And so you might have erred on the over-engaged side to a degree, but what do you say to dads if they're trying to wrestle through that same thing where they feel like you did, where it's like, do they step in? Do they not step in? Do they try to reassert their quote unquote either authority or voice or not. What do you say to a dad who might have been wrestling with the same emotions you were wrestling with?
Yeah, it is. I mean, ultimately it comes back to my relationship with the Lord. I've got to trust God here with me. That's, to be honest. I kind of made it about my daughter, right? Like I got to trust him with her. But in that particular space, what I really needed to do is trust God with me. And can I trust God with me enough to entrust my daughter to him or to somebody else, right? That's the hardest thing, because if my identity is wrapped up in being a dad or a husband, and now I'm going sideways. And so I think with that dad, I think one of the things I've learned is just to be present. That doesn't mean I have to say something, and sometimes it does mean to say something. Doesn't mean I have to write a note to my daughter. Sometimes it means I do need to write a note, or sometimes it just means to be okay in the silence, but to be present, whether we're talking or we're texting or we're just quiet, that my daughters know that I'm present. So I may not have all the answers. I may not know what to say. They may be talking to other friends. They may be with other mentors, Bible study leaders, or so on. But I'm present as best I can be, even while I'm absent, if that makes sense. So I would encourage that dad to be present, even if he's not saying anything or not writing anything, or, not able to be physically present, but to somehow figure out how to be present with their son or with their daughter, even if their son or daughter is with that person who's got the great marriage advice after being married for a year. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Somehow to figure out how to be present. That's super important to me.
I love that.
Yep.
Something you've modeled for a lot of people is the way that you and Christy are partners. Not everybody, there's a lot of single dads out there. There's a lot of divorced families that are making it work somehow. And the dad is a central figure to the kids. But for you and Christy, man, I feel like, and I miss being around you guys, by the way. Like it's great to talk to you today, and we see Sanctuary online, but man, I miss you. I miss our coffees. I miss getting together for lunch, and I miss seeing you and Christy and the kids. Talk about her and how you've leaned on her over time for helping become the dad that you are.
Yeah. Well, thanks. Yeah, we do love each other and try hard to complement each other, try hard to stay on the same page as parents and grandparents. That whole thing, I think, is really important for us. I've said, since I can remember, the greatest thing that I can do for my daughters is to love their mom. I can do a lot of crazy things and maybe, do some good things, but the best thing that I can do for them is to love their mom. And this is going to sound weird, but my dad and mom divorced when I was a middle schooler.
Yep.
And the best thing that my dad, after their divorce, the best thing that my dad did for my brother and I was to honor my mom. Like my dad, I can never recall a time. My mom had an affair, the whole story. We got kicked out of the church, the whole story.
I remember.
But my dad never dishonored my mom to my brother and I. Now, he may have with his buddies, like
right.
he may have torched her. I have no idea. My brother and I, he never dishonored her. And so I look at that in two ways. Best thing I can do for my wife best thing I do for my kids is to love their mom. But I'm thinking about that single dad.
Mm-hmm.
My mom, as hard as my mom is, my mom will always be my mom. And that my dad just gave me the greatest gift by not dishonoring her to me. And if I can say in sort of some ways, he spurred me on to learn how to honor others, even when, his world was torn apart. His heart was just crushed. And yet he gave me this great gift. Like, you know what? It's a human with real problems, and it's not for me to dishonor. So
Wow.
yeah, I think those go together in my mind, you know?
Craig, did you observe that was happening in real time? Like, you know, when you were in middle school and it was happening, were you like, man, Dad sure has got his, or did you, or did you look back and notice, gee, that never really went south in that way?
Yeah, you know, it was I have, my brother's 3 years younger than me, and so it was just the two of us. I had a lot of responsibility for him during that season, and it was noticeable because my mom thrashed my dad in public and to my brother and I, and she would always be on my dad's case to my brother and I, right? So it was so stark of a difference that Dad never did that to Mom, and all of a sudden I started to realize, like, man, she's just killing this dude, and she's
wow.
she's the one who, she's the one who moved out. She's the one who got married. She's the one who, but yeah, it was very noticeable because my mom was just constantly giving my dad a hard time. Never to his face, of course, always to my brother and I. But now as a grown up, or as one who wants to grow up, now I'm realizing she was just trying to feel better about herself.
Yeah.
About, she's just trying to, so yeah, I knew it then. I didn't know it obviously at the degree.
Sure. And
yeah,
one thing we all know as dads, but we like to repeat it on the podcast is a lot more is caught than taught. And I'm going to take a guess. You correct me, Craig, if I'm wrong. You correct me. But during the turmoil of all the family drama, your dad never really sat y'all down and said, all right, guys, listen, here's my strategy for the next 6 to 12 months. I'm just not going to say anything bad about your mom. Like, I bet it was never like, he didn't have a whiteboard and go, there's going to be arrows coming in, but I'm not going to, but you observed it. Like you caught it. Is that accurate?
Totally accurate. Totally. And now I respect him so much for him just modeling, for him trusting the Lord through all that. That's a whole nother story, right? For him trusting the Lord. My mom had an affair with my dad's colleague, his boss, who was another pastor, kind of denominational pastor. So my dad didn't just lose his wife. I mean, he lost everything, reputation. I mean, everything. But he never gave up on his faith, and he never gave up on the church, even Big C Church, even though he got kicked out of the church. And he never gave up on my brother and I, and he so could have. But right, there was never a time where he said, "Hey, God's going to see us through this." Never a time where he said, "We got to say our prayers together now, guys." There was never. It was just, he just lived this kind of quiet, just beautiful, gentle, tender. He just lived in a tender way. And then, we heard him cry. We heard him weep. But he never, it was just, he just modeled this sort of simple faith. Somehow, some way God was going to prevail. And ultimately he did. I mean, he does, and he always will. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Well, and I wanted to draw that story out of you a little more, only because I know a lot of dads who listen to this podcast feel like they've got to do it all, say it all, teach it all. There's this pressure, and okay, we want to try our best and all, but sometimes the best lesson we can give our kids is just to be faithful in a tough season. Let the chips fall. Your kids are going to notice that, man. Maybe while they're 12, maybe not till they're 22, but in some cases, man, we just got to continue to plow ahead. Like Paul said, follow me as I follow Christ. Like, I'm going to try to set the example, and I'm going to let the chips fall. And it's such an inspiring story to not only hear that your dad did that, but that you and your brother noticed it. That's super cool. And I want a dad listening he's walking through something right now that might be similar, might be painful. Hey, man, keep going. Put one foot in front of the other. Do what's right, honor people, be faithful. And, your kids are going to sort this out. At some point, your kids are going to see what happened. And I really appreciate you sharing that. But Lawson, let me turn it back over to you.
You're going to be disappointed in me, Craig. I was in Southern California last week and for a work event and did not get In-N-Out Burger.
Unbelievable.
I thought he was going to be disappointed that you were in California. Like, was that the disappointment?
No.
Craig is originally a surfer dude from California.
Can't believe you can go to In-N-Out. That's an outrage. That's an outrage.
I know.
Outrage.
I got on the plane Sunday and was looking at my calendar for the coming week and saw Bowler podcast on my calendar on Thursday.
like,
And was like, oh no, I've got to confess. So go back to the origin story of Sanctuary.
Yeah.
And something that we felt was important was somewhere for men to connect.
Yeah.
Women too, but like you saw the need for guys to have other guys. Will you underscore why that was and kind of still is important, and what are some ways that we talk often on the show about you don't have to be in this fatherhood thing alone. There are other dudes that you think you're struggling with something that's unique. Nope, we all are.
Yeah.
And it helps to have other guys around you as your cohorts, like close, that you can share like real, authentic, meaningful challenges with and get through things together. Talk about the importance of that, where you've seen it in your own life, where you've seen it in the lives of the guys that are coming to Sanctuary, and help us kind of reveal how God works in fatherhood among us each, as a group, I guess.
Yeah, that's a big question. That's huge, and it is a big. It's a big question because it's a big deal. I just don't think we were meant to live alone. I just don't think that men were meant to grit it out, to grin and bear it, whatever. I think a lot of us, and at least my generation, a lot of us were raised to like figure it out and make it work. And we had dads who loved us, but didn't express love maybe emotionally very
right.
well. My dad's part of the greatest, I think that's called the greatest generation. And there's not a lot of language, not a lot of emotional language. But anyway, I just think I just don't think we're meant to do this on our own. I think I'll just use a Bible story real quick that kind of keeps that is usually in front of me. Jonathan and David. Jonathan was the son of the king, and so Jonathan's getting ready to inherit, the whole kingdom, and he befriends David, who they're just good buddies, and that they have a cool friendship. But there's this story in the Bible where Jonathan, who's heir to the throne, decides that he's going to go pick a fight with their arch enemies, the Philistines, and he says to his armor bearer, "Hey, let's go over here," essentially, and let's pick a fight with these guys. Now, he doesn't have to pick a fight because he's the heir to the throne. I mean, he could, but he just realizes that these guys over there are their enemies, and God's told them to, God's told the Israelites to do their thing and to clear the land, and Jonathan's dad's not doing anything. He's sitting over there by a tree with some guys, and they're just all talking about it when Jonathan says, "I'm going to do something about this." Anyway, Jonathan says to his armor bearer, he says, "Hey, let's go over there and let's kick these guys' butts," basically is what he says. And this is what the armor bearer says back to him, which is so beautiful. The armor bearer says to him, "Do all that you have in mind, because I am with you, heart and soul." Do all that you have in mind, because I'm with you, heart and soul. I believe that every guy wants another guy to go into battle with, to fight with, someone to say, "Hey, I'm with you, and I'm with you, heart and soul." And the guy that doesn't have that, he probably longs for that, even though he may have kind of created this persona that he doesn't need anyone, that he can fight on his own, that his fight he'll win because that's the way that he was raised.
Right.
I don't think so. I just don't think it's possible. And I just don't think it's the way we were created. We weren't created to fight on our own. And we all have different kind of battles, right? In this particular case, it was a military thing. But whatever it is, a battle of identity, or a battle with our sexuality, or whatever, we're all in some form of battle. And to have someone kind of lock arms with me and say, you know what? I'm with you, heart and soul. Oh my gosh, man.
Yeah.
Now we can go take down some giants. Now I can go take on fear. Or now I can go now I got somebody standing with me. I can entrust my kid to the Lord. You know what I mean? Because this guy's standing with me and I know he's with me and he's helping me. Like, you can trust him. You can trust him. I'm like, okay. If you say so, because I know you trust me and I trust you. And so together we're entrusting my kid into the hands of the Lord. That helps me so much, frees me up so much from holding on to it myself. And I don't think I'm alone. I think guys all over Sanctuary are desperate to have someone come alongside and hear their story. Like you said, Lawson, all of the places that we don't want to share because we're afraid we'll be rejected if we share those places. It's when we share those places where the guy sitting across from us goes, yeah, I get it. I know a little bit of that, and then they join up with each other. And how do they join up, man? They join up heart and soul. The next thing you know, they're tackling enemies. They're picking some fights, They're not being passive. They're not being passive.
Yeah,
man.
They're dealing with some stuff that probably has needed to be dealt with for a really, really long time. And to be able to do it with another flesh and blood kind of person then helps us deal with this sort of God who's mysterious and not always sure what he's doing and where he's going, So yeah, that's a long answer, but that's
a great answer.
Paul is we're all in a battle. We all need someone, and we don't need someone so much to keep me accountable. I don't need someone to keep me accountable. I don't need someone that I report all of my failures to. I need someone in the battle with me. I need someone to go, let's go. Let's fight.
Man.
There's a huge difference. So anyway, yeah.
I needed that, bro.
I'm saying, I'll tell you, Craig, we're recording this on a Thursday and don't know when it'll come out, but just this morning, exactly 3 hours ago, I bumped into a really close friend of mine. And he looked at me and he goes, hey, man, how you doing? Just the kind of general greeting. And I looked back at him and because we're so close, because he's such a good friend of mine, I said, I am on the edge. I did. And I meant it. I meant 100%. And he looked at me and I go, so here's our deal. And I said, if you have something hard to share with me, save it for a week or two. I did. I totally said that this morning, 3 hours ago. And I said, right now, I can't handle one more thing. And he goes, bro, let's pray.
That's it.
And that's what we did. And I was like, and no joke, man, I needed to make a call at 9 a.m. that was going to be challenging. It's going to be a challenging phone call. And it was one of the things that had me on the edge. And I bumped into my friend at like 8:30. And he prayed for me at 8:50, and it was it's like, and bro, I've had this friend for 20 years, 22, right? It's been a long time. And the fact that I was where he was today and that oh my goodness, the timing was unbelievable. But he was one of the few guys on earth that I can just say that to, that I can just say, hey man, I'm not, don't bring me one of your problems and don't tell me anything I got to do better. Like, okay, I'm open to that, but could we schedule that, later? Cause man, I just needed somebody to be with me in the fight right then. I didn't need a critic. I didn't need, an accountability partner. I needed someone to be in the fight with me right that second. And it was so God to have that dude be in my space right when he was. Thank you for sharing that. Really powerful.
Incredible.
Hey, Craig, I'm gonna call an audible, and Kent doesn't know I'm gonna do this, but I want to.
Well, hold on. I'm gonna put that through the audible call committee. We're gonna have to vote on it real quick. Just a second. No, I'm just kidding.
Usually one of us closes the show, and by the way, we're not close to closing, though I know you got a meeting coming up. But I'm gonna ask you to close our podcast and be the final voice at the end in the way that I have seen you do for decades, where you close each sermon.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Okay,
where he asks for money. Is that what he does at the end? And if everyone could get their wallets out, please.
Oh my gosh, you idiot.
Yes, I did it. That's my objective. Every podcast, Greg.
I'm going to let you, Kent, say anything that you want about, the end of the show coming up here in a little bit. But before we, and then turn it over to you, Craig, to close us out in the way that you do every sermon, because it is something that I crave. And I look forward to. In fact, when the sermon is, I can tell you're starting to slow roll toward the end. It is such a blessing to me what you do, and I want you to bless our audience when we get to that point. So, but before we do, the show is Father on Purpose, and I want you to talk about purpose and how you've seen dads be purposeful, whether it's yourself or Michael Esco, or somebody else that you've seen, not from a position of platform, not because they're vocal about it even necessarily, or someone that the church has held up as a purposeful dad, but underscore how we can be purposeful fathers.
Yeah. Wow. I think the best example I can give is a lifelong friend of mine. His name's Bill. I married he and his wife. They have 2 beautiful boys, and they're now divorced. And they were married for 13 years. And Bill is the best dad. And he calls himself a yes and dad. Yes and dad. And so a lot of guys, have a purpose. Like, I wanted my girls to play soccer because I played soccer. So my purpose was to get them on the soccer field and make them great soccer players, Bill's posture is so different. When his boys have an idea, his purpose is to fan that idea into flame. And so he's a yes and dad. So, for example, his 2 sons, I think they're just 1 year apart. They might be a year and a half apart. And as they approached middle school, they started hearing about podcasts, and the older brother says to his dad, "Hey, Dad, can we start a podcast and do it in the park and invite some friends?" And Bill's immediate response was yes. And I know where to get the equipment, and I know a great spot where we could go explore it. His purpose was to breathe life into what God is doing in the life of his kids. So while I might have a purpose to get my kid into Georgia, I think that was the purpose for a lot of dads in the Southeast here were to ensure that we did everything possible to get our kids into Georgia or into Alabama or into a good SEC school. And that was our primary purpose, make them a good golfer, or make them a good soccer player. Scholarship, they need a scholarship. Bill's purpose is to raise the 2 boys that God created them to be. And I just am so blown away by his posture in allowing God to take the lead in developing the purpose of these kids that he's created, even in the midst of brokenness and divorce and the whole deal. So I think that's probably the best example that I could give of a life of a dad that is lived in purpose. He wants his boys to be who God created them to be, and he'll settle for nothing less than that. Not what he wants, not what he hopes or dreams for, but what God's doing in their hearts. And of course, he redirects gently and he prays and the whole deal, but he can recognize that God's at work in a way in which he's like, yeah, that sounds right. Let's go. Yes. And I'm going to come alongside of you. And I've tried to model that with my daughters. It's definitely been a shift in the way that I want to parent. I want to be a little bit more of that. Yes. And dad, instead of here are the rules and here's what you got to do. And, you got to take these classes if you're going to get into Georgia.
Yeah. And that's like the opposite of a no, but dad.
Right.
Exactly. That's so right. That is so right. Yep.
Well, and we know you're speaking theoretically because you really don't have to take classes to get into the University of Georgia. Like this, we all know this is like it's a principle. It's a guiding principle. It's not an actual example.
That's funny.
Craig, you're the man. I don't want to close the show. I want you to close the show. Dad, join us next week. Join us next week, Dad, for another amazing and inspiring episode. Lawson, thank you for introducing us to Craig Bowler.
I love you, Craig Bowler.
Love you, Craig. Thanks for being on today. I'm going to let Craig have the last word right after I say, Craig, thank you so much. Not so much just for coming on the show, but for modeling it, living it out, loving your wife as Christ loved the church, setting that example, and leaning into your daughters and now your son-in-law and your grandkids intentionally. God bless you, brother. Thank you for joining us to take it away.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much. Well, I just thought maybe I'd close with this one story, and then I will close with the blessing that Lawson asked me to close with. Just as a dad, I thought that my job, when our kids were younger, I thought my job was, to save these guys and to get them in church and disciple them and all this stuff. And anyway, we had that's part of what my job as a dad is, but that's not really my job. That's God's job. And I came to this understanding that God's really good at it. We can trust him with his job. My job is just to be faithful, but his job is the outcomes. And so if I'm faithful, God's, and even in the times where I'm not faithful, God's still faithful in the outcomes. I'll just tell you this quick story. Our older daughter is a biological daughter. Our younger daughter, we adopted from China, and they're both amazing, amazing girls. But a couple months ago, I was speaking at this night of awareness for adoption or whatever, and they asked me to tell the story of us adopting our younger daughter, AGB, who just graduated from college, and so I'm telling the story about how we all went to China as a family, and we met Audrey in the orphanage, and she became, a bowler, and I was telling the whole story. And afterwards, this guy was standing there, and he said, "Oh man, you saved your daughter from an orphanage, and you saved her from, possible sex trafficking." And I was like, what is this guy talking about? And my older daughter was standing there next to me as I'm having this interaction with this guy. And my older daughter says to this guy, he goes, "We didn't save her." He goes, "She saved us." And I think that's me. When I stand back as a dad, if I really am honest with who I am and who they are, my girls, they're the ones that are saving me way, way more than me saving them, if you know what I mean. They, if I will be their dad and allow them to be my daughters, I think somehow God will save all of us in the process. And so that story sticks with me. Yeah, man, my daughter saved me. So I trust wherever these dads are that are listening, Dad, wherever you are, that maybe you think you've blown it, or you got it sideways, or you have no idea what to do. I would just encourage you to be faithful. Just be their dad, and let your kid be your kid. And together, I think everybody's gonna get saved, and it's going to be okay because God's faithful and he will do it. Well, let me close this podcast with this blessing that I say to our guys every Sunday morning at Sanctuary. And I just pray, whoever you are, Dad, wherever you are, just as you are, I want you to receive, because this blessing is for you. May the Lord bless you and keep you. And may the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. And may the Lord turn his face toward you and give you peace. Amen. Love you guys.
Hey, Dad, thank you for listening to today's show. If you found this episode helpful, remember, you can get all the content and show notes at manhoodjourney.org/podcast. And if you really liked it, please consider doing 3 things. Number 1, share this podcast with someone. You can hit the share button in your app, wherever you listen to podcasts, or just call a person up and tell them to listen in. Number 2, subscribe to this podcast so you get episodes automatically. That helps us as well to help dads find the show. You can do that through your favorite listening app, whatever that is. And finally, review this podcast. Leave us a review, good or bad, wherever you listen. Those reviews also help other dads find the show. You can always learn more about what we're up to at manhoodjourney.org or fatheronpurpose.org. We will see you next week.